Look down at your hand right now. That ring, that small circle of metal, feels like it belongs to a wedding chapel, a florist, a DJ playing the same 3 songs. You think of it as modern. You think of it as invented somewhere between a Hallmark card and a diamond commercial. But that circle you're wearing is the final tiny descendant of something humans were doing 34,000 years before writing existed, before cities existed, before anyone had a word for husband or wife. You are about to find out that your wedding day has a body count, a bead count, and a secret nobody put in the vows. And here's the thing nobody tells you. The story you've absorbed is that marriage is a cultural invention. Something humans dreamed up once farming and property showed up, a legal contract layered on top of biology. But the real story is that pair bonding, the actual glue of 2 people choosing each other, may be older than our own species, stitched into our bodies before we ever had language to promise anything out loud. Understanding this will change how you think about every wedding you've ever sat through, including your own. So here's the real question this video is going to answer. If marriage isn't a legal invention, what is it actually for, and why has almost every human culture on Earth, completely disconnected from each other, invented some version of it? To understand how this happened, you have to imagine a river valley in what is now Russia. Roughly 34,000 years ago, the air is brutally cold, dry, and sharp enough to hurt your lungs. You can smell wood smoke, animal fat rendering over a fire, and the mineral tang of a half-frozen river 50 meters away. Mammoths move somewhere out past the tree line, and everyone in camp can hear them. A low rumble felt more than heard. Death is close here, constant and casual. Nobody in this world expects to live past 40. In 1955, archaeologist Otto Bader began excavating a site called Sungir near Vladimir, Russia, and what he found rewrote what we thought Ice Age humans were capable of feeling for each other. Bader uncovered a burial containing over 10,000 individually carved mammoth ivory beads, arranged in patterns that once decorated clothing that had long since rotted away. Here's why that matters. Someone spent an estimated 10,000 hours of labor, roughly a full year of skilled work, decorating people who were already dead. This sounds impossible, but researchers have actually documented the details in painstaking depth since. In 1969, further excavation at Sungir revealed 2 more skeletons. This time, a pair buried head-to-head in a single grave, covered in thousands more beads, ivory spears, and carved ornaments, positioned as if arranged deliberately by someone who loved them. Anthropologist Eric Trinkhaus, working out of Washington University in St. Louis, spent decades analyzing these remains and found something strange in the bones themselves, subtle stress markers and pathologies suggesting these 2 individuals may not have simply died together by accident. They were placed together on purpose. This wasn't survival. This was devotion carved into ivory. 1 sentence, and then we move forward because that single grave is about to explain something much bigger than one burial, but here's where it gets extraordinary. In 1981, biological anthropologist Owen Lovejoy of Kent State University published research in the journal Science proposing that early human ancestors, going back millions of years before Sungir, show physical evidence of pair bonding built directly into their skeletons. Lovejoy pointed to something specific, the shrinking of the canine teeth in early hominins, a change that in the animal kingdom almost always signals a drop in male-to-male violent competition over mates. Let that sink in. Your canine teeth are smaller than a chimpanzee's not by accident, but possibly because millions of years ago some of your ancestors stopped fighting each other for partners and started choosing one, and sticking with them. But this raises a question that's been debated for decades. If pair bonding is written into our biology, why does every human culture still wrap it in ceremony, contracts, rings, and witnesses? Why isn't loving one person enough? You are standing outside that grave at Sungir on the day it was closed. You can hear wind cutting across frozen ground and the low crackle of a fire someone keeps feeding nearby. You can see ochre, a deep red pigment, dusted across the bodies, and thousands of ivory beads catching the weak winter light like a second skin. You feel the cold radiating up through your feet even as you stand still, and underneath that cold, something heavier, the specific ache of watching people bury someone they loved with everything they had left to give. This is what Ice Age humans did. Not occasionally, not for kings, but apparently for people who mattered enough to spend a year's worth of labor decorating their departure from the world. The evidence only escalates from there. Around 2350 BCE, in the Sumerian city of Nippur, in what is now Iraq, scribes recorded what historians consider among the oldest surviving marriage contracts. Cuneiform tablets spelling out obligations between families, not romantic declarations, but economic alliances written into clay. By 1754 BCE, the Code of Hammurabi in Babylon went further, explicitly stating that a marriage without a written contract held no legal standing at all. Here's the part most documentaries skip entirely. Marriage contracts show up independently in ancient Mesopotamia, in ancient Egypt, and in entirely separate cultures across Africa and Asia, all converging on the same basic idea without ever contacting each other. Historian Jack Goody, working at Cambridge University, spent decades comparing marriage systems across Eurasia and Africa, and found the same pattern surfacing again and again: property, alliance, and legal obligation binding two families together through two people. This wasn't primitive superstition. This was the ancient version of a legal merger, sealing two economic units into one, with children as the shareholders. And that finally answers the question from earlier. Marriage exists in every culture not because biology alone is unreliable, but because biology needed backup, a public, enforceable promise strong enough to survive when feeling alone might not. Today, we've flipped the entire equation. We treat the ceremony as the disposable part, planned in a weekend, forgotten by Tuesday, and the feeling as the only thing that's supposed to last forever. Ancient couples had the opposite problem, a feeling that might have been just as real, backed by an entire village, an entire legal system, an entire year of carved ivory making sure nobody could pretend it hadn't happened. We traded public, physical, permanent proof of commitment for a private feeling we're told should be enough on its own, and most of us never even noticed the trade had been made. Anthropologist Helen Fisher at Rutgers University scanned the brains of people newly in love in the early 2000s and found activation in the same reward circuitry involved in addiction, the same dopamine pathways that make you crave another hit. That feeling in your chest on your wedding day is not new. It is one of the oldest, most chemically consistent experiences a human body produces, and every culture in history has tried to build something sturdy enough to hold it. Back at Sungir, the two bodies buried head-to-head, the ones found in 1969, were eventually studied for their exact ages, and the results were harder to sit with than expected. Based on skeletal development, researchers estimated one individual was around 12 or 13 years old, the other closer to 9 or 10. Whatever bond these two children shared, whether kinship, ceremony, or something else entirely, someone in that freezing camp 34,000 years ago decided it deserved thousands of hours of ivory beadwork, ochre, and a burial beside people twice their age given the exact same treatment. Think about that for a second. In a world with no writing, no religion as we'd recognize it, and almost no chance of surviving to see 40, somebody still stopped everything to make sure two children were remembered as inseparable. That is the oldest wedding gift we have physical proof of, offered to people who never got a wedding day at all. So look down at your hand again. That ring is not a modern invention borrowed from a jewelry commercial. It's the last surviving piece of a much older tradition, a public, physical object meant to prove to an entire community that two people chose each other and intend to stay chosen. The distance between you and that freezing river valley in Russia isn't as far as it feels. That ring on your hand is not a promise you invented, it's a string of ivory beads 34,000 years long. And tonight, without knowing it, you are still holding the other end.